What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. And we are locked and loaded, not just today, but for the rest of the week. Today's guest list is jammed. Robert Mays in 25 minutes at 4:30 from the Athletic Football Show. Scott Pioli, the Super Bowl winning executive now with the NFL Network, joins us at 6:30, and the one and only 8 to 9 Santana Moss with us coming up at 5 p.m. today. But it's a competition Wednesday, and that means we start with Dan Quinn and Jayden Daniels talking to the press today. And I think one of the real big stories from last week was how Dan kind of shaped the week and shaped the narrative. And we, have referenced this for as long as they keep playing this season and probably long beyond. With that story that Mitch Tischler told us last week about how they had the sign in the locker room that said they've got to go through us, that it wasn't this house money, we're the underdogs mentality against Detroit. It was, we belong here. We're going to go show everybody that we belong here, and they've got to deal with us, not we're lucky to be here and let's see what we can do. And so Dan Quinn was asked today if he is taking the underdog mentality into this week. And I'll give you one guess on how that went.
We just don't let the outside narrative kind of drive it. And internally, we've got a lot of expectations about how we can play and what we do, but we never, went too far outside of things. Did we feel dismissed or put off? Yeah, of course some. I think that happened in the opening game. I felt dismissive. Hey, man, hang in there. It's going to be a long time. I was like, hey, F you, that's not how it's going to go down. And I was upset, but it wasn't disrespect. It was dismissiveness. And I felt some kind of way, but it didn't motivate me more to say that's how they think of us. It wasn't disrespect. It was we're going to be a lot better than what we just showed today, and eventually we'll show that. So it's not a prove it to everybody else or underdog story. It's it's how we get down. This is not a 7-game series, and so we got to play our best on Sunday at 3:00, and that to me is the biggest factor.
And Dan has done an incredible job of that this year, because I think realistically, maybe he'll talk about this after the season. Maybe he'll just always say exactly what he just did. But there was probably a good amount of patience that was to be expected from the front office and ownership going into the season, because why would you have these expectations? It's year one. Hey, we want to do this the right way. That's not, always conducive to winning immediately when you tear something down to the extent that they tore it down. Although I guess what they tore down was terrible. So, that's probably a relevant factor. But to build into something that puts you at one of the NFL's Final Four, there's teams that take years to get here. I mean, Detroit got to this point last year and lost, but it took them multiple years to get there, and then they were better suited this year. They just ran into the wrong team. Teams like Philly, teams like Kansas City have been working to get back here, stay here, in Kansas City's case forever. Buffalo's been working to get back. They had to remake their team around Josh Allen, because even if you have the one piece, the competition is so stiff to get to this point, it's really hard. So the idea that they can just do it in year one, it was far-fetched. And as someone who, we went back to our 1st and 10 after before the Tampa game to say, hey, what's still relevant? And my first thing was hey, this team is going to require patience, because it's going to play a lot better than they did today, but it might not always be good enough to win. And turns out they figured out pretty quickly how to not only play better than they did in that opener in Tampa, where they didn't play remotely up to their standard, but that their standard with the talent that they have is good enough to win. And as we've talked about this week, they've improved the talent that they have with how they use them schematically, how they've developed players, and it's all just tremendously impressive. And that leads us to this weekend and a showdown against the Philadelphia Eagles in the division. And if we could go cut 5 actually here, one of the fascinating things to me this week, and you'll hear this in my conversation with Robert, we actually taped earlier this morning, but in many ways this game is really simple. It seems on paper like it's just a matter of who can do the things that we obviously know both sides need to do. Philly can't give up big plays to Jayden on the ground and or through the air, and Washington can't give up big plays to Saquon. And it kind of seems like the game is in many ways that straightforward. So for Dan, as the person who's at the helm of trying to find a competitive edge, how do you find a competitive edge in game 3? Because he just said it's not a 7-game series. This is a 3-game series, if you will. Just we're down to game 3.
Yeah, I think the natural narrative, you know them and they know you, and I don't really think of it that way. You start right back at it. What are fresh eyes on the games? What are fresh eyes on the times from when we played it? The easy narrative would be, hey, they know us, we know them, but it's different than that to me. This is our first time playing them in the postseason. Game 1, what needs to be different? What could be the same? What do we need to start doing? What do we need to stop doing? Same thing in the second game. And so as you get into the third matchup with somebody, you want to make sure you have fresh eyes for the first 2. Hey, did I miss something? And was there something there that I didn't, think we had or did? And both teams will have things on their call sheets that never got called in that game. And you do have those up still that you've been practicing. And sometimes every play on your call sheet doesn't make it into the game, and you keep those alive as well.
So there's a schematic element there. There's obviously a personnel element too. You're now studying these guys for the third time. Can you find another tick? Can you find something? Obviously, from game 1 to game 2, Washington changed some things with their offense in terms of moving Terry around a lot more. Noah Brown to De'Ami Brown is a big change in terms of the routes run and the play style and all that kind of stuff for the offense. So there's plenty to consider. Jamison Crowder obviously had a big day, including the game-winning touchdown in the second one. I don't think he even played in that first matchup. So what kind of role can he have this weekend? On the other side, Nick Sirianni's trying to figure that out. And Sirianni's an interesting coach. Guy with an offensive background who definitely had his hands in the offense a lot last year, I think much to the chagrin of a lot of pundits. And this year, I mean, he certainly has his hands in some. He's allowed to. He's the head coach. But what has Dan learned over the years from facing Sirianni, and what is he expecting in kind of his head coaching matchup this weekend?
I wouldn't say, because going against their team over the last few years, they're aggressive. The 4-down football style is similar to ours in terms of being bold and aggressive. They play tough, but there's not one marker that stands out to me more than another, other than much like last week, both teams, be ready to defend all 4 downs, because both teams not only are willing, they're both excellent at it.
I would be so curious to ask Sirianni the same question about Quinn and see if you get a similar answer, or do you get something much more distinct of they play fast, they play hard, they play physical? Because Philly does bully teams a little bit. Like Philly's really physical. They definitely have an attitude to them. I think especially on defense, and Jalen Carter is kind of the leader of that. I think they probably were a little nastier when Jason Kelce was there, even though Cam Jurgens has done a really good job at center, and he himself. It's just like you lost a leadership piece. And so what does that look like? And I think that one of the things that's going to be interesting this weekend is Sirianni is uber aggressive. Like, can you take advantage of that? Can you get stops on 4th down? Can you steal possessions that way? And if you can, and then take advantage of it the other way, like that's enormous. Can you get good field position? Because he goes for it at midfield and doesn't get it. So these key situations are huge, and it's also going to depend on the health of Jalen Hurts, right? We know he's going to play, but how healthy is he? That ankle, knee, whether it's high ankle sprain, knee sprain, whatever it was that he got rolled up on last weekend, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch the tush-push situation. But I would also say this. Washington did a really good job against Detroit of not having to deal with 4th down. You played differently. You're a little more aggressive. Can you get pressures? And they also made plays. I mean, on the 3rd and 1 where Dorrance Armstrong forces the fumble, the only reason Detroit probably doesn't run it there and just get a sure 1st down is because they're probably going to try to take a shot and go for it on 4th down, or get a chunk at least. And they got Amon-Ra St. Brown isolated on Bobby Wagner. He just tripped. And then Dorrance made a play while Goff had to hitch. And if you can make plays like that on Jalen Hurts, who does hold the football, is susceptible to turnovers in the pocket, as we saw in the first matchup. I believe he had a fumble. I might be thinking of a different game. I've watched so much Philly at this point that it's hard to keep all the details straight. But that is something that has happened, and that is something that he will do. And so that is something to watch for sure this weekend. Washington, part of the reason they're here is they played clean. They haven't turned the football over. They have done a good job largely of avoiding penalties. And if they can do that this weekend, then they absolutely give themselves a chance. Up next, more from DQ, including what his plans are for the offensive line with Sam Cosmi out. And we'll continue to hear from Jayden Daniels and more throughout the day. Robert Mays coming up at 4:30 here on the Team 980. Robert Mays, host of the Athletic Football Show, with us coming up in about 10 minutes, actually about 12. Top of the hour, that's 5 p.m. Santana Moss. 6:30 tonight, Scott Pioli will join us, the former NFL executive, now with the NFL Network. Right now, though, let's let you hear from Jayden Daniels a little bit, and then from Dan Quinn on the guys who are tasked with protecting him as they prepare for the NFC Championship game. And Jayden was asked, very simply, as a rookie, what does it mean to play in this point or in this game at this point in the season?
I just think for me, football is just it's fun, and like I said, it's like a safe haven for me. Everything I've been through personally in my life, so I'm not really going out there and stressing about the moment, because at the end of the day, I get to do what I love each and every week, win, lose, or draw. So it's just a blessing to be one of those kids that are able to fulfill their dream and live out their dream of playing on Sundays in the NFL.
And in case you're like, what has Jayden gone through? Not that you're doubting it, you're just unfamiliar with the story. I would highly suggest anyone who's a fan of Jayden watching The Money Game, which is on Amazon Prime. It's a documentary series that followed a bunch of LSU athletes, including Jayden, but also Angel Reese and Livy Dunn and some others that it was it was his final year at LSU last year, and talked about NIL stuff, and just you get to learn a little bit more about him, about the relationship with his mom, and so much more. But specifically to what he's been through, like, this is someone who lost both of his grandparents, who he was very, very close with, to COVID within quick succession of each other. And that really was like I won't say a turning point, but a changing point, a significant point in his life. And, it's something that he thinks about and we'll talk about when asked about. And, for him to be able to do this just a couple years later, because at that time he was still at Arizona State. Think of all the different changes in his life since then. Pretty cool for him to have that perspective, and for that perspective to be helping him. The shots of him on the sideline are a joke. Like, no one's supposed to be that calm. Nevertheless, the starting quarterback, who's a rookie, and these shots of him just chilling, pretty remarkable stuff. As for the guys who want to keep him upright and chilling, Dan Quinn asked about the offensive line today with Sam Cosmi out. So they've got decisions to make. How do they move it around? And one thing that you'll hear about offensive line is just get your best five out there. And I don't know that that's entirely true. I'm curious to hear DQ's answer in a second, because he was asked directly that. But, they still have to play positions. They still have to play together. But could you, put Cornelius Lucas at right tackle, kick Andrew Wiley into guard, something like that? Is that on the table? Here's DQ answering that question today.
Yeah, a lot of thought to that, David. And first, let's give a quick shout to Trent of coming in and really being somebody that can handle that. But yes, that is absolutely, how we go about it. And that would be there at any spot. Like what I was saying earlier, like, what's the best thing for us to win this game? And then that is all there is. And so, that's really where we're at in terms of the next 3 days of our practice.
So that's going to be interesting, because it sounds like it's not off the table. And Wiley as a right guard, I think, would be pretty good, and you can run a lot of the stuff that you run with Sam Cosmi. And Cosmi, it's more unique because of his mobility and his strength and his power, and he's certainly a better guard than Andrew Wiley will be. But, Wiley has a lot of mobility, and he can get out there and do some things. And so, do you want Trent Scott, who's also got some good mobility but doesn't quite have the power? Do you want him in there? Or do you want to kick Wiley inside and then put Cornelius Lucas, who's probably a better player than Trent Scott, outside? I think it's hard because, Trent Scott played pretty well at right guard. Now, that doesn't mean it's the playoffs. You do what's best for the team, and there is no finagling. There is no, this guy earned it. There is no such thing as earning it. There is just, hey, he earned it because he's the best guy, and that's our best option. And I think it's also interesting that Trent Scott was the guy who went in instead of Michael Dieter as the backup there, where Dieter was thought to be the backup swing lineman. So you have some options. I don't know what they'll ultimately do. I guess I don't know. I guess you probably keep Wiley on that right side and would put him at guard, and you move as few pieces as possible, because I think Wiley's experience at guard might be on the left. So do you kick Allegretti over to the you start playing this very silly game that I don't want to say it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for me to list out all the possible combinations. It matters for Dan and Bobby Johnson and Cliff Kingsbury and Anthony Lynn to decide which one is actually best for them. And it sounds like they've got multiple options on the table. There's also a team that's rotated at times this year. And I think that is potentially on the table as well. Could they give some different looks to the Eagles, give some different looks to Jalen Carter, especially considering you are kind of dealing with the spot, that right guard spot, where Jalen Carter often is lined up off the shoulder of that player. On the outside, Brandon Coleman has just solidified himself as the starting left tackle for this team, certainly now and probably on into the future. Of course, the rotation piece started with him and Cornelius Lucas doing that. So what has Dan Quinn seen from Brandon Coleman this year in terms of his growth, development, and just kind of who he is?
Yeah, I thought just a lot of resilience early, battled through some of the injuries. If you go way back, came even to training camp, and is he going to be ready, and will he be there? And battling, some with Big Luke into the spots. But I think the resilience is the stuff that has impressed me the most as a first-year player, battling through it. And he's grown a lot into that, knowing like I can play with that. Much like a baseball pitcher, you may not know he doesn't have his A game, but he was able to really go and deliver. And that's a good trait to have for any pro player in almost any sport where they have to play through those. And he's really done a good job on that now that he's back and healthy. That's a big deal.
For sure is, and he played a lot better last week. Had a tough one against Tampa, but played well against Detroit, and we'll see what he can do against Philly. His third time seeing this group, and I actually this morning went back and watched every explosive run that the Eagles have given up this year. It didn't take that long because it's only 45. Anthony, get this too. You ready for this? The Eagles only gave up 45 explosive runs this year, which I'm counting for this purpose as 10-plus yards, which is how I can sort it on NFL Pro's film. And three of the 45 over 18 regular season games, or 18 regular season weeks, 17 games, were on the first series against Green Bay.
Oh, wow.
They gave up 2 to the running backs, and then Green Bay scored on the opening series on a reverse by Jayden Reed. I was like a 33-yarder, as long as I'm remembering and reading the timestamp correctly. But I was like, dang, we're still at like 12-something in the first quarter down there in Brazil. And sure enough, they didn't give up that many more. They gave up a couple more to the Packers, a couple more here. Then like you get to one game, and then it'd be another team, and you'd be like, oh, okay, they gave up 1 the entire game. The Commanders' first game against them was one of those. They gave up, I think it was a 14-yarder to Brian Robinson. That was it. The running backs had 0 in the second game. It was just Jayden Daniels scrambles. Now, they were in pretty big spots, including the scramble late where Jayden juked Jalen Carter out of his shoes, and the 4th and 11 where he juked the entire team out of their shoes for a 29-yard gain. But getting the explosive runs in the way that Washington did last week against Detroit is definitely going to be a lot harder against this Philly group. But there's a decent amount of them that come over Josh Sweat because he's really aggressive as a pass rusher. So, he's lighter, and you can move him a little bit. And 2, especially if he's like in pass rush mode and he's not expecting it. And 2, there's sometimes he just gets upfield, and you can just pop, move him out of the way. And now instead of having to block him, you've just removed him from the hole. And that's obviously tremendously helpful. So, there's your first scouting report of the week from this chair. And that's what people are here for.
Yeah, I'm ready for it, man.
They want the nuts. They want the bolts. Who's really good at the nuts and bolts of the X's and O's in the football? It works better on radio, Anthony, if you say something as opposed to just raising your eyebrow. The YouTube stream appreciates your facial expressions, but it does work better if in the audio format.
Who are you talking about?
Robert Mace from the Athletic Football Show. He's going to join us next here on the Team 980. 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Reminder that on Friday at this time, we'll be talking to Ian Eagle, the Westwood One play-by-play announcer. Of course, you know him from the NFL on CBS and the NBA on TNT as well. You know him because he's Ian freaking Eagle. Ian's going to be on the show on Friday. He's calling the game on Sunday for Westwood One. You can hear that broadcast right here on the Team 980. Super, super pumped to be able to bring you the NFC Championship game featuring your Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles coming up on Sunday. Other things to note. About a half hour from right now, Santana Moss with us live here on the Team 980. 2 hours from now, Scott Pioli, NFL executive. If you can't stick around to listen, you're going to want to definitely hit that one on the podcast. So make sure you're subscribed to the Hoffman Show podcast, wherever it is that you get yours. And we got a bunch of other good stuff lined up for later in the week as well. I do believe that Kevin Burkhardt is going to join us tomorrow. So pretty pumped about that. He's calling the game for Fox. It obviously called the Detroit game this weekend where the Commanders won. So Burkhardt, Ian, Scott, that's just getting started. We have a couple other big ones, including some big blasts from the past that might be joining us later in the week as well. But right now, it's my pleasure to share with you a conversation I had a little bit earlier today with one of my great friends in the business. Robert Mays is the host of the Athletic Football Show, and here was our chat about just how awesome what the Commanders are doing is.
You could look at everything Washington did this offseason and make an argument that the 50-50 chance or the 70-30 chance, whatever, came up in their favor every single time with every single move that they made.
Joining me now, the host of the Athletic Football Show, Robert Mays. I think he's one of the best talking about the sport, and it's great to have him back on the show. Robert, good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Good to see you too. I'm doing well.
Excellent. Love that. You got in your town for your team, you got Ben Johnson now being the head coach for the Bears. Unfortunately, I brought you here to talk about his last game, which, you know, his team did score 31 points despite 5 turnovers, which is not nothing. But I still am just in shock. I think so many of us here in DC are in shock at how this Commanders team has pulled this together, how thorough and dominant the performance was. And so we're going to talk about that and then look ahead to the Eagles. But when you look at that Lions game and specifically what they were able to do to that Lions offense, I think one of the things that almost gets underrated is how well the defense played, that Johnson felt like he had to keep going back to that trick play bag, the bend but don't break style, and then their ability to create turnovers at a rate that they hadn't all year. What did you see from that side of the ball before we get to the thing that everyone's talking about, which is Jayden Daniels?
Well, I think that for the most part, like, the Lions did what they wanted to do offensively for most of that game. I think that's worth mentioning. Like the trick play thing, you're down 10 because you turned the ball over a little bit. You probably don't need to do it in that moment, but I didn't come away from that being like the Lions did something wrong offensively. Jared Goff makes multiple mistakes in that game. Like, the strip sack happens at the 30, 25 yard line. You're driving. The first interception he throws, like, that's just a decision that the quarterback makes, right? Like, the underneath option is open in cover 2 there. You just have to check the ball down. And the throw that was intercepted by Mike Usain still, like, that's the right read. Like, that play is open if you lay that out into the end zone a little bit more. Like, that's a post against quarters where the safety's like clamping down. Like, all of that stuff is the mistakes that could have been avoided if the quarterback makes a slightly different decision. I think Jared Goff has been very good this season. I think Jared Goff has been very good for the Lions, but it was not the best game for Jared Goff. The two things that I would point out, I think, for Washington's defense specifically, probably 3 things. One, like, that's a great play by Mike Usain still. And like, what he has done for them this year he's been excellent. And that's part of a larger conversation about how good of a job this front office did in assembling this roster this offseason. 2, the run defense in the second half was so much better than it was in the first half. I mean, if you look at it, they were averaging like 9 yards carry in the first half. In the second half, it was just, they looked like a human rushing offense. It was like 40%, 45% success rate, like 4 yards a carry. Like, they really did clamp down in the second half in that regard. And I think that you saw glimpses of what the front can be, right? And like, going into it, we always knew that this was going to be the strength of this team defensively from a roster perspective. And you get Jonathan Allen back. I thought that Teron Payne had some really nice moments. I've always thought Dorrance Armstrong was a really solid player. Dante Fowler for what he's given them and what he's getting paid is an absolute monster home run. So that to me is what I would kind of zero in on, is that the front in the right moments in the biggest parts of that game had its moments in a way that it needed to.
Yeah, and that's kind of been a theme for them where they've given up some big stuff early. Unfortunately, sometimes it's been reversed. They played really well for like 3 quarters in some games, and then they just fall apart at the end. Putting together a full 60 minutes defensively has been kind of a challenge this year. But that's kind of what they did against Philadelphia as well in that second matchup. Obviously, Jayden goes out. But, when you look at teams and how they make adjustments around the league, how would you rank how Washington is performing on that side of the ball, of their ability to find a tweak or find an answer within a game?
It's impressive, and I think it speaks to how this team is constructed right now, where you don't need to be great defensively for 4 quarters. You're not gonna be, right? Like, this is a unit that was pieced together mostly through mid-tier free agents. It's a unit that was very much a rebuilding side of the ball for a rebuilding team. It's about, can we bow up a little bit? Can we get a couple high variance moments like a turnover? And can the offense carry us? And I think that if you can stumble into 4 or 5 of those a game, and you can find a couple important adjustments that gives you a puncher's chance on that side, I think that's what's really important. And over the last few weeks, they've absolutely been able to do that. It helped that the Bucs shot themselves in the foot in multiple different times, and it helps that the Lions did that as well. But if your offense is avoiding mistakes and you can coax the other offense into making a couple, that's a worthwhile formula for a team playing as well as this one is on offense.
Robert Mays, the Athletic Football Show, with us here on the Hoffman Show, Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. All right, let's talk about what everyone's talking about, Jayden and what he's doing offensively. And we can talk about the offensive structure, and I know there's some things that you really like about what Cliff's doing in a second. What he did with the run game in this game was very, very impressive. But to the point you just made, Jayden not turning the football over on top of the high level of stuff that he's doing. Like, are you comfortable saying this is the best rookie season ever for a quarterback? Or, are we at that point? Is it almost inarguable, or are there other people that you'd say, like, we've kind of seen this before, but the team success obviously is at a different level?
I mean, I wouldn't be comfortable talking about it like before I started covering the league, just because I wasn't looking at it that way. I don't, like, you go back, I don't know what Dan Marino's rookie season looked like, stuff like that. But since I started doing this like 15 years ago, I think it's kind of inarguable. Like Andrew Luck was very good in tough circumstances as a rookie. Justin Herbert was excellent in fairly tough circumstances as a rookie. But when you combine what he did in the regular season with what he's done in the postseason, it doesn't really seem like a conversation. Like, I think this is the best we've ever seen a rookie quarterback play, especially when you consider some of the high stakes moments he's had to be a part of.
Is there a moment for you where things like the conversation about him shifted, where it went from like, this is amazing for a rookie, to like, oh, this is just top 5 quarterback play, and this is what we should expect from him week in and week out?
I don't know what that would look like. We did a show on our podcast probably midway through the season with me and JT O'Sullivan, and we were talking about all the rookie quarterbacks. And as part of that discussion, I was already in, like, by that point in the year. I said to JT on that show, you can go look it up, I think that there is a better chance he wins an MVP award than he becomes like a below average quarterback in the NFL over the next 10 years. And it was mostly rooted in just how quickly things were happening and how assertive he was in making those things happen quickly, how fast he was seeing stuff. It's remarkable. And I still feel that way. Like when you watch him, get backside to things, or how quickly he's the thing we've talked about a lot. He is so good at finding voids in coverage. Yep. And I think that there are 2 different areas where that manifests the most. One is when you're playing just zone coverage against him, he's going to find space. And I think the offense has been structured to allow him to do that. Like, the rate at which he consistently finds completions is incredible. And then the other side of that is when you blitz him, that also creates voids in coverage. And that's why I was so surprised that the Lions approached things the way that they did. Like, if I were playing against Washington right now, I'm playing man coverage, and I'm trying to have some sort of like hug rush or spy. I'm not sending extra bodies at the quarterback. It could be tempting because he's a young player, but when teams have done that against him, especially when they've played zone behind those, he's just sliced and diced it way too much. I think you have to make the receiving talent on this team beat you. I would not let Jayden Daniels beat me. And I understand if you're Detroit, you got zero pressures when you brought 4 in that game, and you didn't feel like you could play the game that way. But if you go back and you look at the numbers, when they rushed 4 and played man, Washington's offense wasn't good. And so that's why I think Philly is just a different beast, because they don't have to bring pressure and they don't want to, and they are capable of playing man against teams that warrant it. And I wouldn't be surprised if they leaned into that. So I think that those two areas where finding voids in zone coverage and just really being able to hurt you when you blitz him, those are two things for a young quarterback that I think show a real refined approach to the position that is notable.
So the numbers don't lie. Like, you're 100% correct, obviously, on the idea of, or what, I guess not even the idea, what happened in the Lions game, what's happened in other games this year. But if I'm a defensive coordinator, or if I'm a head coach and my defensive coordinator comes to me and is like, hey, we're not going to get any pressure, we're going to play man and let that guy sit back there forever, I'm going to be like, then he's eventually going to find something and murder us. So is that actually the best plan? Or is it only a plan that can work if you are Philly, which I guess is the only thing that matters at this point this weekend? A team like Pittsburgh did that and did that very, very well against them, because that's how they rush. They rush very well as a unit and can actually keep him in the pocket. But for most teams, is that even a viable option moving forward, for the rest of his career?
Depends on the teams you're playing against, right? I mean, I think that there are going to be, when you get into this point in the season, there are probably going to be teams that can do that against you. And to me, it's not even about rushing 4. You can rush 5, but when you start doing more than that, like, I think against him, I don't necessarily know if you need like a middle of the field zone defender. Right? Like, if you're playing cover 1 and one of your off-ball linebackers is that like rat player in the middle of the field, I would rather have that guy hug rush or play like some sort of de facto spy near the line of scrimmage. If you look back at what the Bills were doing to the Ravens, right? And you watch what Milano was doing consistently, where he'd be in sort of that left A gap, B gap area. They were actually bringing 3 when he was doing this, but he would sit there and be ready to spill over the top if the quarterback were to scramble. Like, that's what I would be doing if I were playing against Washington. The way this changes is if they get better receivers, it becomes less of a viable option for the defenses playing against them. And over the next couple of years, when they have endless resources, you would assume they do this. But right now, I think that's the way that I would approach this team, because again, I just wouldn't let him beat me. I also think there's a misnomer that when you play man, quarterbacks scramble against you at a higher rate and scrambles are more effective. And I have to assume that's part of this, is the teams look at what he's done as a scrambler and they say, we can't let him do that to us. Well, if you look at the numbers, it's actually not true. Like, teams that get scrambled on a lot are teams that have bad or incomplete pass rushes, where quarterbacks can have time or they can find alleys to escape. So again, I would rather go down swinging, making the receivers on this team beat me, than letting Jayden Daniels sit there and pick me apart if I were playing zone coverage.
Robert Mays, the Athletic Football Show, with us here on the Team 980. When you look at the big picture here, and we'll get back to the Eagles game in a second, but talk about the front office, and you're someone who pays attention to like assistant coaches and what they're doing. A lot of people around the league and the lower levels of front office. I kind of have a great understanding of how this stuff works and how it's built. How Washington has flushed out their front office, not just with Adam Peters at the top, but some of the pieces that they brought in underneath. How impressed are you, or how rare is it to be able to do this, period, nevertheless, in 1 year like they have?
It's very impressive. I mean, I'm sure your listeners will hate me for saying this. We like to do this every year when a team has success that we didn't necessarily expect. And like, everything they do is great and the line is going to go up and up and up for the rest of time. And that's never how this stuff works.
Of course.
And I think that when you look at what Washington did this offseason, everything they did, all of these moves are, they're not coin flips. You probably have a better percentage chance than that, but there's a percentage chance of them hitting. You could look at everything Washington did this offseason and make an argument that the 50-50 chance or the 70-30 chance, whatever, came up in their favor every single time with every single move that they made. Like, you could go through the free agent signings, like Biotish, Allegretti, what Austin Eckler has been for them, the plan they had for Brandon Coleman at left tackle, what Frankie Louvu has been, Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler making $1 million, Jeremy Chin being a really good version of himself, Bobby Wagner having the season he's having at his age. Like, everything they did came up the way that you want it to come up. And you hope that will be the case moving forward. And when you have off seasons like that, it, I think, creates ingrained confidence in the people making those decisions. And so I think that's what the type of team you want to become is the type of team that deserves the benefit of the doubt based on the series of decisions that you've made. And based on what Adam Peters and that front office did this year, I think that Washington is on the road to being that sort of team.
I think that I would say two things in response to that. One, I hope that you're right, because they were so intentional with the things that they did. They brought in guys with specific roles in mind, and it's like, we're not just going to bring in these guys, throw them together, and hope that it works. It's like, we're targeting this guy because he does X. We're going to ask him to do X, and those guys have then gone out and done X, and that changes from a coin flip to the 70-30 or the 80-20 or whatever it is. And I think the irony is the things that didn't work out for this team, to the extent that some things haven't worked out for this team, are the moves they didn't make. It was the bets on some of the guys that were here that they then realized pretty quickly were like, oh, whoops, that's not going to work, because they had to make some decisions, right? They couldn't go 50 new guys. They went 30 new guys, which was still the most in the league. But they were like, all right, let's give Emmanuel Forbes a shot. Let's give Jahan Dotson a shot. And those are the two big ones where it's like wide receiver 2 until De'Ami Brown's had 2 great games here. Everyone's like, well, what's the answer there? And then they had to go make the Lattimore trade because Forbes didn't work out. And so the irony is that to the extent that there was questions about what they did, it was the moves they didn't make versus the moves that they did.
Yeah, and I think that that's the benefit of bringing in new leadership, is that Adam Peters has no obligation to make Emmanuel Forbes work. It doesn't matter that they spent a first-round pick on him. This is sunk cost, man. There's nothing about that should tie you to him as you're thinking about future decisions. And I think the clarity that comes along with new leadership sometimes can be beneficial. You're not going to keep throwing, good money after bad. You're going to try to move on when it's time to move on. And I think that they've absolutely done that.
Robert Mays, Athletic Football Show, with us for another few minutes here on the Team 980. I love the way that you guys organize your preview pod, so I'm gonna throw that format back at you real quick. We can do a condensed radio version, and then folks can tune into you and Derek for the long podcast version. But when Washington has the ball, what's the most interesting thing for you in the NFC Championship game?
What they're going to do on the back end, and like how they're going to challenge him and how they're going to make it hard for him. You can't make it easy on him. He's already too good, and he already makes too good of decisions for you to consistently be putting him in a position to succeed. I think that when we think about young quarterbacks, the idea of bothering them in the pocket is paramount for a lot of defensive coordinators, right? Like, I want to make him feel uncomfortable. That is different for everybody, right? Like, I think with Lamar, what the Bills did to him, where it's like, we're going to blitz a lot. We're going to make him play faster than he wants to. That's okay. I would rather make Jayden Daniels play slower than he wants to. And so I think you have to tailor your game plan and your approach based around the quarterback that you're playing. They aren't just young quarterbacks, right? They aren't just scrambling quarterbacks. He is his own unique bundle of traits. And I think that you have to think about him that way. I want him sitting there in the pocket longer than he wants to be there, because sometimes that leads to him taking sacks. And I think that, to me, would be how I would try to go after him if I were Vic Fangio. And I think that for Vic specifically, that's how he wants to play. They're not going to send a lot of pressure. I think that that's Washington. The Eagles defense overall, I think, has the capacity to give him a hard time, even if we've seen him have success against them at some points this year. So that's what I would say on that side of the ball. On the other side of the ball, like, it's very simple. Like, can you stop them from rushing for 250 yards?
Right.
Like, the game isn't that interesting. Like, it's interesting in terms of the stakes and the personalities and the stakeholders and the storylines. I'm very excited for it. But as far as the nuts and bolts go, I think that the most important aspects on both sides of the ball, I haven't even started doing my prep for it yet. It's very easy to land on both of those things.
No doubt about it. And that was kind of the key in the matchups earlier this season. Washington did a good job of stopping Philly the first time around until they didn't, which is kind of what happens with Saquon Barkley. And then they reversed it in the second game. And obviously Hurts gets hurt. and they're able to come back in part because Philly can't run the football anymore. And so in many ways, it is that obvious. The doing it is the much harder part than the prediction on that side of it. Robert Mays, you can check out the Athletic Football Show wherever you get your podcast. He and Derek Klassen multiple times a week. Great stuff always. Robert, appreciate your time here on the radio, my friend.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon.
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.
right, rescheduling with Santana Moss. He's going to join us at 5:30 here on the Hoffman Show. So in lieu of Tana, who's probably stuck in a studio with Logan Paulson, we're gonna give you some Logan Paulson. Take command style here on a Wednesday. We got a fresh preview for you coming tomorrow in the Take Command feed. Full preview of the Commanders and Eagles game. But let's look back one more time at the Lions game and what this Commanders defense was able to do. As you just heard in our chat with Robert Mays, like a lot of what happened was bad execution and or decision-making by Jared Goff. But defenses impact a quarterback's decision-making. So what was it that Washington was able to do? And also, how do they shore up that run defense? Logan and I talked about it. And if you haven't heard it yet, you're in luck because here we go on the Team 980. Take command, Logan Paulson there, Craig Hoffman here. Let's take a look at the Commanders defense to wrap up this here podcast, Logan. A unit that created not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 turnovers on Sunday against what was the number 1 offense in the regular season. 33 points a game, not so much this time around, Logan. And arguably, like, they gave up some stuff, obviously. But, I mean, considering if ball is life, maybe their best performance of the season?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And it's one of those games where it's like you knew it was going to be a tough slog for them defensively. Like, that offensive line's amazing. The running backs are great. Jameer Gibbs is for sure a future star, if not a current star, however you want to categorize him. And so in a game like this, I think talking with, anybody, Dan, anybody around the team, talking with you, anybody who knows ball, like, this was going to be a tough lift, right? And what did they do? They turned the football over 5 times, which is great, and I think that's exactly what you need to do. Like, you needed to give our offense the ability to possess the football, control the game, and when you get those turnovers, you're able to do that and keep points off the board too. Like, there's that 2-minute interception that Mike has, which is great. There's the return by Quan, which is fantastic. There's the end of game interception by Jeremy Chin, which was really well read by him. He did a great job on that. But, like the fumble in the red zone, like all of those.
Oh my God, I forgot about that play till I was watching the film back. I was like, oh, right, that's how this drive ends. That was a monster play by Dorrance Armstrong.
Huge play, because it's 7-3 at that point, and they're going in to score. Like, they're going in to score a touchdown. They're on their 17-yard line. And so when you look at those moments, you're like, that. What could you ask for them in that situation? Like, you get Bobby Wagner one-on-one with Amon-Ra St. Brown. He trips. Dorrance Armstrong wins quick, and you get a sack, and the ball's out. You get the ball back, and I think our offense goes down and scores. And that's the first time on that subsequent drive that they lead the game. So in terms of making plays when you have to make them, like we talked about how this defense throughout the year has been very opportunistic. They've been opportunistic on third down. They've been opportunistic in the red zone. And this is the same script. However, the opportunistic element is that they got the ball out and they were able to turn the football over, which is exactly what you wanted to do. And versus a team like the Detroit Lions, this absolutely had to happen. And they crushed it. They crushed it. And so, like, the fact that they get, so I'm trying to remember the exact game flow here, but it's, if I remember correctly, it's like they go down, the offense scores, and then the next play is after the fumble, Washington touchdown, Detroit touchdown, Washington scores again, but then there's the interception return for a touchdown, and all of a sudden Washington feels like they're in total control of the game, which was kind of awesome. And so that's defense. And so we just talked a lot about the offense and how well they played. But the defense versus a very good, very explosive Detroit offense did a great job of being opportunistic in the right moments. And we've talked about this a million times on this show. When you're looking at, the red-green breakdown for the defense, I'll tell you, there's a lot of red in this game. But the green comes at the right time, and they're big plays, and they're getting the ball back to the offense.
No doubt about it. And they got 5 turnovers in this game and still gave up 31 points. And we're like, what a performance. Like, it is kind of wild how that goes, but like, it shows you the power. And that was kind of the story of the weekend, right? The story of the weekend in the NFL writ large was turnovers and how they can undo really great performances because the Detroit Lions, down in, down out, were really good offensively in this game, but you can't overcome a turnover, and you especially can't overcome a pick six. Like, it's over. That chapter is written. It is done. We are on to the next chapter. There is no making up for it. There is no anything. And that's the thing, is like the difference in Washington's defense and Detroit's defense in many ways is like Washington didn't break. And Detroit did at times. So, if you can just get that stop of we gave up a 35-yard run to Jahmyr Gibbs, but later in that drive we forced the fumble. Okay, well, if that 35-yarder had been a 70-yarder, then you don't get the chance to force the fumble. And that, in many ways, that's the key to beating Philadelphia too. Don't let Saquon score from far away. If you can do that, you got a shot against Philadelphia. If not, it's going to be really hard to beat the Eagles, and most teams haven't done it. And so I think that's the thing that's so impressive is there's just, I don't want to say a comfortability, because it's not like, oh, yeah, here we are. We're getting driven on again. Psyched. But, there is a confidence, I guess is probably the right word, that they're going to have to earn it. And then you go get the Sanders still pick in the end zone. You get the fumble in the red zone. They have a knack for, in the bigger moment, when the space gets tight, of doing the thing that they need to do. And that's, the ultimate version of that is this game.
Yeah, and I think Fletch, he says this almost every week on the broadcast, but I think it captures what you're talking about. It's they defend every blade of grass. So these 4 plays before might not be good, but we still have 10 yards to get to the end zone. We're going to throw down, and we're going to put our foot in the sand and be like, we're going to fight you here. And there is something to that. And it's something I haven't felt in covering the team the last couple of years, is there was kind of this, oh no, here we go again. With this team, it's we're in the fight, and you might be punching us in the face, but we're going to keep trying to get after it. And you see that with them. And you see it in last week against Tampa Bay when they get that miraculous turnover by Bobby Wagner on the botched handoff. They could have easily been checked out. We just missed a 4th down conversion. You're back on the field. It's a sudden change. But, hey, we made you right. Here it's the same thing. And they're driving in that 2-minute situation, and Mike Sanders still gets an interception. Great job. And then we come out at half and have the opportunity to go down. And you're never out of the fight. You got to keep swinging. And it would have been so easy after the explosive play on the reverse to kind of hang your head. But no, we're back out here. We're getting it done. And we're playing 60 minutes of football. And there's a lot of technical stuff we can talk about, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the mindset of the offense for the Commanders and the defense for the Commanders cannot be overstated. I know you like talking about the psychology of it, and you see the importance of it with this team every time they're on the field, special teams included. And we don't really talk about special teams, but talk about just a big middle finger to Detroit. We're going to directional kick, and we're going to tackle you. We don't care how good you are. We're going to tackle you. And I thought
Detroit
that was just...
Yeah, I was going to mention this at the end of the show, but since you mentioned it here, Logan, do you know how many drives Detroit started outside of, on their side, or the side they'd want to of the 30-yard line?
I don't know. This is
one, and it's because Zane Gonzalez kicked it out of bounds on the opening kickoff. So every single time Detroit got the ball, it was either off a kickoff where they had just given up points and the Commanders tackled them inside the 30, a touchback on the 30, or the one trust-way punt was on the 9.
Yeah.
See, that was it. They literally, you're just we're going to come down and we're going to hit you. And there are multiple drives that start inside the 25, if not inside the 20, because of how well the Commanders cover kicks. That is a huge weapon for them.
That's a huge deal. And when you talk about wins above replacement and winning percentage in a game, starting field position is one of those sneaky hidden metrics that people don't talk about a lot, but it's incredibly significant. So if you're able to save 5, 8, 10 yards on a drive, it decreases by full, it's not a percentage point, it's 10%, right? You're 10% less likely to score if you start a drive on the 20 as opposed to the 30. So you're giving your defense that leg up. And we're kind of rambling now, but the aggressive mindset of the Washington Commanders in this game, and 4th down conversions on offense, or attempts on offense, covering kicks, and just saying we're going to find every possible mathematical statistical advantage in this game, I thought was absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, so let's get into some of the technical stuff and how the Commanders deployed their guys. A lot of zone in this game from Joe Witt Jr. And also a decision with the cornerbacks, which I thought was interesting and one to watch this weekend against Philly, is they don't move Marshawn Lattimore around. They didn't have him follow St. Brown. They didn't have him follow Williams. They're just like, you know what? Both these guys are really dangerous. We're going to play sides. And Detroit then tested Mike Sanders still, and you find out that Mike Sanders still is not exactly the best guy to test because he's got tremendous ball skills. And So I think there's a bunch of decisions that Joe Witt makes in this game that obviously pay off in a big way, but that's one of them. And then the amount of zone was, I think, the one that stood out to you.
Yeah, I think we talked about it on the preview show, or you and me talked about it. It's just
sorry if we didn't do it into microphones, everybody.
Yeah, when Jared Goff has the football, he is this entire year. You watch all this, like he is very confident. He's very aggressive down the field. And one of the things that sticks out to me in this game plan is I felt like Joe Witt Jr. knew that 100%, and he's like, you know what? You're not going to be patient enough. You're not going to be patient with some of these throws. Like, for example, on the interception that Quinn has where it's returned for a touchdown, it's 2nd and 12. The hook player could not be deeper, could not be more under the dig to Tim Patrick. It's actually like a kind of a corner, like a swirl route. It's like a corner to the comeback. You're kind of finding a zone window there. And he should definitely throw the ball to Sam Laporta. And Sam Laporta is probably going to run for 12 yards. Or not 12 yards, but let's say he runs for 6 yards. You're going to be in 3rd and 7, right? You live to play another day. He is throwing that ball come hell or high water. Like he is ripping that thing. And I think that is a really good understanding of what Goff does well, but it's also the thing that hurts him tremendously. And you saw that on that play. I think you see it a little bit, on the play where Mike Sanderson intercepts it in the end zone. Like there is a dig that is wide open. There's nobody around it. But he's like, I'm throwing this post. And great job by Mike Sanderson understanding it. But I think Joe Witt Jr., to my eye, I haven't talked to him about this, seemed to really get that Jared Goff is going to be a gunslinger down the field, attacking that deeper, like middle section of the field. And even when it's not there, he's going to throw it. And on film, it showed up and he completed more than he missed. But in this game, he missed a whole bunch that obviously that is the difference in the game.
For sure. And it's funny to look at on the Next Gen Stats site, they have like the spray chart of throws.
Yeah.
And he does he throws right a ton in this game. He's avoiding Lattimore's side. But the success rate is just not very good to a lot of this stuff. Where he's only 23 of 40 on the day, 313, 1 touchdown, 3 picks. And the touchdown, by the way, what a catch by Laporta. Like there's so many things in this game that you forget about because the game had so many plays. The Commanders, there's almost 100 plays of film for the offense in this game for Washington. Like I you just log onto the NFL Pro and I'm like, I got to watch how many plays? 96?
Yeah.
What the hell? But for Goff, he doesn't have anything deep to the left. He's got nothing deep to the center. He's 2 of 2 to the right deep, technically. Although I don't know exactly how this spray chart works, considering the deep. I guess technically they're counting the Sainer still interception to be the middle of the field, but they were able to kind of funnel his completions into certain areas and limit the damage. And of course, they still get some explosives. They kind of manufacture some of those explosives. But I think the fact that Washington played well enough down in, down out, that Ben Johnson felt the need to keep going back to his trick play bag and then ultimately went to it one too many times, is something that is a compliment to the Commanders' defense. Yeah,
I think so too. I think to me, it's Ben Johnson understanding. And again, I haven't talked to anybody about this. Is just an observation from the game. Watching him prior to this, Jared Goff is excellent off of play action. He's excellent off chunk plays. He's aggressive on third and long situations. Really, he's had a tremendous year. But he's not a guy that's going to methodically move you down the field, in my observation. I'm sure he has plays where he's done that, but it'd be interesting to watch his success rate or look up his success rate on 2-minute drives or whatever, long kind of dink and dunk, Joe Burrow-esque type drives. And so I think when you watch him in the 2-minute in this game, he's so reluctant to check the ball down. He's so reluctant. You have Jahmyr Gibbs, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, you have a couple of the most dynamic people, at making people miss underneath. Those checkdowns, if you hit them in rhythm, are explosive chunks, but you're so focused on getting the ball down the field. It's Tampa 2, and it's an extreme version of Tampa 2. It's not going to happen. Check the ball down. And I felt like the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator really understood that that's not what he wants to be. So we need to find explosive chunks. And when you're looking for explosive chunks, you kind of get deep in the trick bag. And I think it's one of the reasons they call a lot of trick plays is because it helps them manufacture these chunks down the field. And when you can't hit them, I think it shows the limitation of an excellent football player in Jared Goff. Let me be I think he's had an excellent year, MVP caliber type deal, but he's not perfect. And this is, I think, where you see some of his imperfection.
And if you can speed him up, like he makes mistakes. Like this is kind of was Sean's thing with him in LA, and like it hasn't come up a ton in Detroit because their offensive line's so good. But if you can speed him up, and I think one guy that deserves a ton of credit for how he played in this game is John Allen. Like John got after it. He was the guy that got most consistent pressure per some of the next gen stats and like the tracking data. And I think it shows up on film at times. I thought was pretty good against the run. There's a couple of really nice plays where he's able to kind of play the guard that's blocking him down the line of scrimmage, string out the run, and do what he needed to do. But this defensive front, I think John had a really good one. Obviously, Dorrance, a couple of huge plays. And then, dude, Dante Fowler was a maniac at points in this game. And to see, I think, again, from like a storytelling element, the guys that really won this game in so many ways, like, of course, John, Terry, like those guys deserve shout outs, guys that were here. But like, this is another Adam Peters is the executive of the year game where it's like you get Dorrance, you get Dante making huge plays. Frankie makes a couple plays. Bobby's obviously playing like Bobby. But just on down the list,
and then
I was going to say, then the draft picks, like, and the irony of this being in Detroit where the draft actually was, like Jayden and Mikey being probably the two most important players in this game, and the fact that these are rookies that you took in two of your first 3 picks, like it's just Adam Peters, good job, dude. Like, congrats. I know this is breaking news to you because your team's going to the NFC Championship game, but you've done a good job, sir. You've done a good job.
No, absolutely. And it's, I think giving Adam Peters a shout out is very appropriate because of all the stuff that he's able to, and the hit rate. I mean, it feels like every person, Biotish has a good, like every person that you've brought in and you've paid and you kind of were like, got them on, very team friendly deals are all of a sudden, it's like, wow. Look at this. And, it'd be interesting to talk to him, like, kind of behind closed doors and be like, did you know it was going to be this good? I'm sure he'd be like, no, because no one knew it was going to be this good. But, like, the fact that the coaching has developed them, they found roles for these guys, that relationship between him and Dan just seems to be on point already, is just incredible. And so, yes, it's awesome that all of those guys were contributing. It's great to see older guys, like John did a great job. I thought Duran had some really nice plays in this game as well. Even Jeremy Chin, I know he misses the tackle in the long run, but he has the interception late, just kind of makes up for it. So lots of big plays in this game. And again, I go back to the thing that I love watching the most is just the consistent effort. The consistent physicality, and they're just going to get better at it. And I can't wait to watch them go against a team that kind of prides themselves on being like the bigger, badder bully in Philly. And we're going to talk about that game on Thursday, but it's just,
I can tell you're chomping at the bit. You want to talk about that game so bad.
It's exciting.
So bad. I can't wait for it. Can't wait for that Thursday show. Last thing real quick, because this is also super relevant to Sunday's game and Thursday's show, but Commanders did a much better job in the second half against the run. How they turned the tide. Part of this is just game flow and game script, but yards per carry and such, like they're much, much better in that second half. What adjustment did Joe make? Because this has been a thing that he's been able to do at times. Like they have really flipped the script on some run games in the second half. What was the adjustment they made this time?
So again, we've talked about this a ton, and you've already alluded to it a little bit already. It's when they are ahead, you dictate to the offense a little bit more. So there's a lot less of like 2 tight ends, big personnel. Let's like drive these guys off the ball. Those runs that were kind of murdering them in the first half, you don't see them as much because it's more 2-minute stuff. They have 17 plays of 2 minute in the second half of this game, right? Like you're not going to see a lot of runs in that look, right? And so that's a huge element. And I think when you look at the Philly game too, it's the second Philly game, like they made some adjustments, but it's really just like kind of getting a beat on what they're doing, guys getting a feel as the game goes on, like a run that you misfit in the first half, all of a sudden you're fitting it correctly now. So I think that's it. It's when they play good complementary football, the Commanders, that it just helps the defense at every possible turn. And I think the guys are smart enough. They're well coached. The coaches on the sideline do such a great job of making corrections after every single drive and every single series. That I think that's part of it. That's part of why it's better. And it's going to be a big deal against Philly, obviously. But they've shown at times this year they can really batten down the hatches and stop those explosive runs.
And again, like they did a good job of making sure outside of the Williams one, which is just a special play with his speed and kind of some things that go, they really got, that was like a great scout. Like Quan Martin's doing a really good job coming down, fitting the run. The problem is the run gets reversed in the other way. And now he's trapped inside and bad things happen. But like outside of that one, even on a couple 30-yarders, like they make the tackle in the end and then make you earn it. And that's the thing with Saquon is, can you do that and just give up 30 as opposed to giving up 70? And the Rams found out what happens when you give up 70. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. Scheduled to catch up with Santana here. We're supposed to have him at 5, and then their shows are running late, and I guess they're still running late. So we will get to Tana when we can. If we got to bump it back to tomorrow, we will. We'll definitely have Scott Pioli an hour from now. Or I'll cry, Anthony. We can't have multiple people that have to shift around on us on one day. I can take one. I'm a tough guy. 2,
I'll cry too.
I got tears. Speaking of tears, that's another segment we do. This is Competition Wednesday because it's Wednesday at 5:30. So we're going to roll with that in lieu of Santana here. And first, Anthony, we will need to go over the results of last week, and then we need to pick Conference Championship weekend. So are you ready to unveil the results from the weekend?
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I was born ready, Craig.
Okay, excellent. So, fun fact, I, a week ago, when I wrote down these picks, I did not actually write down who made the picks on 3 of the 4 selections because my brain was not working because I was eating hot wings. Anthony, you might recall.
Yes.
Yeah. So the good news is the way this worked out, it actually is okay because there was only one game missed between the two of us, and that was the one I wrote down. TBD if that's good for me or good for you. Let's go chronologically. Now Anthony is antsy. Now Anthony does not know what to think of this segment. The Kansas City Chiefs were 7.5-point favorites by the time that we got a hold of this line on last Wednesday. Despite the field goal shenanigans, they covered 7.5. There were places where this became 8.5 later in the week, and that on the safety at the end of the game cost a lot of people money, or made people money, depending on which side of the coin you were on. I do believe that's a game that I picked, Anthony. I have that down as correct for me. So that is a 1-0 for me.
I'm proud of you, Craig.
Thanks. You took the Washington game.
Yep, I did, sir.
Where the Commanders were 10-point dogs. Anthony, I do not recall how that game wound up.
Oh, you don't? I do.
How did that go?
It ended with a Washington Commanders left-hand win, baby.
It sure did. They covered and then some. By the time kickoff rolled around, like almost 60% of the cash in Vegas was on Washington, which should have told you that Washington was winning that game. Or was on Detroit. It should have told you that Washington was winning that game because that's how that goes. But yeah, so that's 1-0 for the both of us. Anthony, the next game was the Rams and the Philadelphia Eagles.
Ouch.
And the spread in this game was 6.5. And on the Monday show with Tony, I picked the Philadelphia Eagles to cover the 6.5. Unfortunately for you, in a hot wing-induced something, I changed my mind by the middle of the week, and I picked the Rams. This is too stupid to make up. We have the video if you want to go double-check it. But I have written down LAR plus 6.5, which would mean that I went 2-0, and the one game that I definitively had who picked it written down, because it must have been, I don't know why I did this. And again, my brain was on fire because of hot wings, was that you picked Baltimore -1. The Bills won that game, and thus I have returned to the mountaintop of competition Wednesday.
Oh, my gosh. Are you serious, Craig?
I am so serious, Anthony.
Are you sure that is how everything panned out?
100% sure? No. I am not operating at 100% right now because I don't feel great. I also was not operating 100% last week because my brain was melting due to a hot sauce named Ninja Napalm that I did to myself. But am I pretty sure that's correct? Yeah, I am.
So you're telling me that I must spin the wheel of mediocre puncher.
That is correct. Do you have to go get it from the other room?
I do, sadly.
All right, you want to go do that real quick? Just to think, Anthony, this could have been a private conversation between the two of us or something that at least was mitigated until tomorrow if Santana was done with the shows. But alas, TV production sometimes runs over. And so we have to fill time and we have to do things that, when they don't get moved around would be at this time. And luckily for us, we had Competition Wednesday in the bank. And now you, me, God, and everybody knows that I have broken my streak. That not only did I break my streak, where I was losing, but I was heinous, and I did it with a perfect week. By the way, we will pick this weekend's games coming up in a second as well. We'll also react to some of the coaching news around the NFL, but Anthony is slowly, and I do mean slowly, but surely bringing the Competition Wednesday wheel of mediocre punishment back onto his side of the studio. There he is now emerging in the camera frame. Now we have to get this sucker set up. Again, some of the punishments are an ice bath, which we still both owe the show. There's hot wings. I would not, Anthony, I will say, I will not make you do the Ninja Napalm. As someone who does not like hot and spicy food, I will give you the less spicy of the two sauces if you roll hot wings. So you got that going for you, which is nice. You got 100 push-ups potentially on there. All the fantasy stuff is off the table. Anthony, are you prepared now to spin the wheel of mediocre punishment?
I was born ready, Craig.
Okay. That's probably not something you should be proud of. You know, I was born ready to not spin it, you know? My picks reflect that. All right, Anthony, give it a spin.
Nothing.
Here goes nothing. Da-na-da-na. Da-na-da-na-na-na. What'd it land on, Anthony? Did it land on an ice bath? So that's a third trip through the ice that you got to make now, huh?
I got to spin it again.
Why do you get to spin it again?
Too many ice baths I owe.
All right, spin it again. Land on hot wings. Oh my God, that was a hell of a spin, Anthony. It's still going. I can't read that. It's too small on the screen.
Fantasy sub.
Fantasy sub. All right, last time. Don't spin it so hard. That took too long. Got freaking Hulkamania over here. Don't give this guy 100 push-ups, otherwise we'll be here forever spinning this wheel.
We got lunch.
All right, Anthony owes me lunch again. It's like the fourth lunch you owe me this year.
To be honest, fantasy sub, lunch. For some reason, I just can't stop landing on those two. And ice bath, of course, too.
An ice bath. All right, so we still owe 2 ice baths. Anthony owes me lunch. And now we owe picks. We owe picks. I guess we can do these now real quick because there's only 2 games. And then coming up next, there's a couple of these NFL coaching moves that I want to talk about real quick since we have the time to do so. All right, first up, go in reverse order here. Buffalo at Kansas City. The line on Monday was Kansas City -2. The line as we sit here today is Kansas City -2. Oh, I guess I have to go first, right? Sorry, I'm out of practice. That wasn't a bit. I wish that was a bit. I wish that was a bit. But it's not a bit. I am going to go with... I'm going to go... God. I really want Buffalo to win. But this happened to me on Monday's show. I went to have the words come out of my mouth that were going to have me bet against Patrick Mahomes in the NFC Championship game. And then I decided that was a dumb idea. Give me Kansas City because I like being right, even though I'm not rooting to be right on this particular occasion.
I love that for you, Craig. I think I would have gone the same way, just never bet against Mahomes.
Well, you have to make the same pick, Anthony, so we're both picking both games here.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Chiefs as well. I will say the Bills do scare me, but the Chiefs do too. I got to go with the Chiefs, man. Every time I've bet against Mahomes, I've lost. Every single time.
Right. It's just, that's the thing. He's the boogeyman. Okay. The line has moved in the Philly-Washington game in Philadelphia's direction. It is now -6.5. It was 5.5 when it opened on Monday when I first laid eyes on it. And I still have not made up my mind on who I'm going to pick in the game. Obviously, I know who I want to win, but I have not made my my money line pick, my straight up who's winning pick yet. However, I feel pretty good about Washington covering the 6.5. So, Anthony, we're probably going to have to find a tiebreaker here because I'm guessing you are also putting your left hand up.
I am indeed.
Okay. May I interest you in the total in either one of these games?
Oh, my gosh.
The Bills and Chiefs are 47.5. The Commanders and Eagles are also 47.5.
If I had to choose one, I'll probably say the Eagles. Eagles, Commanders.
You would, and which side would you be on?
The over.
Oh, man, because I would be on the under of the other game.
The under of the Bills Chiefs?
Yeah.
I would too, to be honest.
This is going to be hard. All right, tell you what. Hopefully, we just carry this over to the Super Bowl because there's only one game to pick there.
Yeah.
So we'll cross that bridge when it comes.
But what if we
right.
both end up picking the same team?
I guess that is a problem, wouldn't it? All right, Anthony and I are going to put our heads together, not live on the radio, for a tiebreaker of some sort. I don't know. How many wins will the Wizards have this week? Maybe something like that. Don't look at me like that. I'm throwing out ideas. No bad ideas in a brainstorm. All right. When we get back, though, the Jaguars proving again that they don't know what they're doing. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Pick 6 at 6 might be coming at you at 6, or Santana Moss is. I think those are two pretty good options. So we'll see if the Tandem Man is done at the studio and if he can still join us. And if not, that's all right. We'll try to catch up with him later this week. And you'll hear from Jayden. You'll hear from DQ. And did we ever? I know Terry talked. Did we ever hunt down any of that stuff, or Frankie or anybody else that yapped today?
Yeah, they spoke. I haven't had a chance to cut those two as well.
Okay. Well, if you want to work on that now, I can make fun of the Jags real quick.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll let Anthony do that, and that means you get some Terry McLaurin. You get some Frankie Louvu in your pick 6 at 6, along with Jayden Daniels and Dan Quinn. But today, the Jaguars did something they should have done 2 weeks ago. They fired their general manager, Trent Baalke. This is nothing personal per se against Baalke, although I don't think he's particularly done a good job. But I think it's pretty clear that the coaching search that was happening there was being impeded by the fact that they had a very stupid setup in Jacksonville. And if you recall a couple weeks ago, I talked about this when this news came down. So there's this awkward, I guess it's a press conference, but it's really it's a call. It's a virtual press conference. And I happened to be watching some tape of, I think it was the Week 18 game. Yeah, it would have been the Week 18 game, Cowboys-Commanders, and I was sitting in my living room, and I was trying to keep track of the news of the day as coaches were moving. And so I put NFL Network on in the background, and NFL Network happened to carry this press conference live. And during it, all the questions, and by the way, it's a split screen. It's Shad Khan, the Jags owner, and Trent Baalke, their, at the time, executive vice president or general manager or whatever titles he was carrying. And almost all of the questions went to Shad Khan. And a lot of them, awkwardly, because on the other side of the screen is Baalke, kind of boiled down to, like, why are you keeping this dude? And the answers were terrible, not only in their substance, but in what was actually being explained. So Khan basically was like, he's built up a lot of infrastructure, he's hired a lot of people, we don't want to tear everything down, and we think that the problem here is the coaching, which, you know, if that was 100% true, then fine. And I don't think Doug Peterson did a great job and that he actually deserved to keep his job and all that kind of stuff, considering the talent that they had. But it sounded a whole lot like you could have just been asking those questions to Trent Baalke. And it seemed very much like Shad Khan, instead of being an independent owner who had consultants and things that he could go to say, like, hey, what do you guys think? Or had an acumen to really understand what he was looking at, got a set of answers from Baalke, who he clearly likes, and from Peterson, and he chose to believe Baalke, and then just assume that that was the truth. And the reality is, it's not. And this is a many times over problem for the Jags, because Baalke, before the season, apparently told Shad Khan, like, oh my God, this is the best roster we've ever had, and Khan said that publicly, and then when it doesn't work, it's like, well, it's obviously the coach's fault. Not so much. This wasn't the best roster. Like, your GM's not that good at his job. And not only that, and here's the kind of Commander's angle to it, if you will, the thank God that's not us anymore angle, is Khan was bragging that he thought this job was really attractive because, we have Trevor Lawrence at quarterback, which that part of it is, but also this guy, the head coach, gets to report directly to me, and so does Trent. They don't have, you don't have to report to the GM. You have an open door to the owner. Imagine Adam Peters and Dan Quinn just not having to talk to each other. That it was designed that, like, no, you go pick all the players, you set the 53, you do all this stuff, and then you coach up what I give you. No, hey, we're trying to run this scheme. We need this kind of characteristic. Can you go find it? Yes. Not an agreement on what gets a commander tag. Just a full-on separation of coaching and personnel. It's a stupid way to run a franchise because it's not how football works. You need the right skill sets and the right mix of players and the right character guys and the right everything. And a GM should be hiring a head coach who he is in lockstep with. The best consistent winners in the league, there is that outside of basically Howie Roseman, who, Eagles head coaches tend to have a little bit shorter tenure. But Howie's very, very good at his job, and very clearly, I think when Sirianni has a guy that at the very least they they think can guide the ship in the right direction. We'll see moving forward. But, Howie lost power back in the mid 2010s and then got it back because he was so good at drafting and selecting players and signing the right free agents and all those kinds of things. He actually is good at building the team. And that team then has been used well by a couple of coaches. And then there's been maybe a shorter leash because of whatever reasons. But the Rams, consistently good. The Vikings now over the past couple of years, consistently good. And again, these teams haven't necessarily won championships. The Rams did. But they're in the mix every year. What Detroit just built and what we hope Washington has built. There's a congruence. There's an alliance. There's an alignment in the front office and the coaching staff that is essential to NFL success. And it's very clear that it took 2 weeks of trying to find a head coach in a somewhat thin and very selective head coaching market to have that realization perhaps come to Shad Khan. But here's the worst part. If I was Ben Johnson, I would have considered Jacksonville if I could have brought my own GM. Ultimately, Ben Johnson chose quarterback over quarterback and GM and bad owner. He's like, questionable owner, questionable GM, got my quarterback in Caleb. And that's where he went in Chicago. If they had just done this on the day that the season ended, does Ben Johnson look at Trevor Lawrence and the chance to maybe bring Lance Newmark from DC and go, that's the job that I want? Seems a question that Shad Khan's probably asking himself. And today, after Liam Cohen, the Tampa Bay Bucs offensive coordinator, turns them down, apparently Shad Khan got the message that nobody wants to work with Trent Baalke, and they're going to have to start over not only on their GM search with multiple candidates off the market, but their head coaching search in a very different light, run a different way without Baalke in the mix, which hopefully will be good for them in the long term, but just shows a total misunderstanding and something that the Commanders, in terms of the front office futility, had for a long time that, thank God, we don't have to deal with anymore. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, the Pick 6 at 6. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. It is time right now, just a little after 6 o'clock, to let you hear from some of the key participants in this weekend's NFC Championship game, which means we get to go to Ashburn. Yep, that's right. I'm going to say it again. The Commanders are in the NFC Championship game. So let's hear from not only Dan Quinn, but Jayden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, Frankie Louvu over the next half hour as well before Scott Pioli joins us live at 6:30.
The 6 biggest Commander storylines.
It is caught!
Delivered at 6 o'clock sharp. It's the Pick 6 at 6.
We set out to find a leader, someone who could take this franchise to the next level, build an elite team that consistently competes for championships.
Let's get right to it with number 1. All right, Jayden Daniels, he took to the podium today, as he usually does on Wednesday. He's actually going to speak again on Friday this week as well. Also joined, not at the same time, but later, Terry McLaurin, Frankie Louvu as well. And all three players spoke about what it's like to be in this NFC Championship game. Here's Daniels on what it's like to advance this far.
It's a blessing to make it this far in the season. This countless a lot of, I know teams want to be in this position, so it's a blessing. Can't really take it for granted, but you also just got to be in the moment and, take it one day at a time.
Something he's done extraordinarily well this year, and that has gotten him farther than basically any other rookie quarterback ever. There's just a few others that have gotten to this stage, a rookie starting a conference championship game. None of them have had a defense ranked as low in scoring as Daniels has in the modern era. Of course, one more win, and he's in the Super Bowl. That would be a first. No rookie quarterback has ever started the Super Bowl. What would that mean to Jayden?
Man, I'm not even thinking that far. It will obviously be a blessing, but, I'm just focused on, how can I be better day by day.
Could have put $1 million on that being the answer, but someone had the audacity to ask. For guys like Terry McLaurin, the perspective is quite different. Terry, here the entire time, so many bad seasons, so many losing seasons, tasted the playoffs once before, but never in a season like this, and never, of course, this far. The Tampa game was his first playoff win. Detroit now his second. What has this playoff run meant to a guy that's been here since 2019?
Yeah, it's been a great run so far. Seeing the way that we've come together throughout the course of the season, fought through some adversity in the middle part of the season when we lost a few, and then to end the season strong like the way we did. That momentum I feel like we've carried into the playoffs, and each week we've gotten better. DQ talks a lot about leveling up, being better each week, and I feel like we've answered that call, and it's going to take our best this week to be able to win and in Philly. So it's been great to be a part of this, but we're not really celebrating or reminiscing because the job's not done yet. So we're looking forward to the challenge this weekend, but I'm proud of the way that we have just continued to get better each and every week, and we still don't feel like we've reached our ceiling. So to feel that way in this part of the season, you couldn't ask for more. So everything we want still out in front of us, but we're focused on preparing the right way so we could go into this game fully ready to go.
Terry, a long history of playing well in Philadelphia, going back to his very first NFL game. I remember I was there, caught 2 touchdown passes, including a big long one early on in that game. For Frankie Louvu, the story is a little bit different, but also not too dissimilar. A lot of losing for Frankie Louvu in Carolina. Now in year 7 in the NFL, what's it been like for him to be on this ride?
Man, it's crazy because I was asking the guys, if we were to ask the question, would y'all think we would be here today or we might have a chance? a lot of guys say we have a chance, you know what I mean? But it just took time for us to build that brotherhood, build that bond in anybody, anywhere, anytime, and we got that. So, man, we got a special group, and I'm going to go with my boys, 100.
They do. They're on message. They're on message not because they're on message in the way that like a politician doesn't answer the question and is on message. This is truly who they're about, and that has helped get them to here. A third rematch with Philly, number 2 here in the Pick 6 at 6. And that idea of this is not the second matchup, this is not a rematch like Tampa was, this is a third rubber match type of game here against the Eagles. Unless you ask Dan Quinn, because he's looking at this thing just a little bit differently as he is wont to do.
Yeah, I think the natural narrative, you know them and they know you, and I don't really think of it that way. You start right back at it. You know, what are fresh eyes on the games? What are fresh eyes on the times from when we played it? The easy narrative would be, hey, they know us, we know them, but it's different than that to me. This is our first time playing them in the postseason. Game 1, what needs to be different? What could be the same? You know, what do we need to start doing? What do we need to stop doing? Same thing in the second game. And so as you get into the third matchup with somebody, you want to make sure you have fresh eyes for the first 2. Hey, did I miss something? And was there something there that I didn't, think we had or did? And both teams will have things on their call sheets that never got called in that game. And you do have those up still that you've been practicing. And sometimes every play on your call sheet doesn't make it into the game, and you keep those alive as well.
So that's Dan Quinn going into this third matchup against the Eagles, which he would probably not even like to call a rematch. It's just a third matchup against teams, or between teams wearing the same 2 uniforms. There's obviously a lot of carryover. There's obviously similar. The coaching staffs are the same. There's going to be some schematic similarities. There's a ton of player crossover, although a couple key pieces have changed on each side. For Jayden Daniels, he kind of cracked this Philly defense the last time out. 5 touchdown passes, including the game winner to Jamison Crowder. So what's it like for him to see the Eagles for a third time?
I think you put some different wrinkles into the game plan, and I'm pretty sure they will too. But at the end of the day, it's about execution and fundamentals, and that's a very good team that we're going to face for a third time again. So they got a lot of good players. Obviously, we know them; they know us. So it's going to be a fun matchup going up against them on Sunday.
It is definitely going to be a lot of fun. This game is so simple in so many ways. For Jayden in the offense, can you find the explosives that you found, whether it's through Eckler or down the field to Diami, down the field to Terry? Terry had that great catch in that first one on Kenyon Mitchell. Is Kenyon Mitchell even going to play? By the way, he was questionable today. The Eagles did a simulated walkthrough, so they didn't have a full practice, but Mitchell was limited. So was Jalen Hurts, for whatever that is worth. Deron Payne amongst the key guys not practicing for the Commanders. But on the rematch side of it, it comes down to, can the Commanders find that as explosive plays? And then this final first half part of our Pick 6.
Number 3.
Can they stop Saquon Barkley? It really is that easy in some ways. It's just doing it is hard. Here's Frankie Louvu.
No, man, it's just pretty simple. Just, us being in our gaps and making our hits. He's going to find little creases here and there, and that's something he's good at. Checking every gaps, making sure everybody's disciplined. And, on our part, we just got to be in our gaps and making our hits when it comes.
I don't know that Saquon's the best, set it up. Gibbs was amazing at this, watching him back on film. That dude is so skilled as a running back, and, little nuanced things that really pop. Saquon is if I see a gap, I am sticking my foot in the ground, I am going, and you are not going to catch me. And obviously in the open field, hurdles, jukes, sometimes combined all in one, he's very, very special. But, it's a different type of thing than facing Gibbs and some of the other backs that they faced. And obviously other backs have found a lot of success. So has Saquon. Saquon also had a really bad second half against the Washington in the last game after Jalen Hurts wasn't there to help him out on the zone read type of stuff. And that threat had been eliminated. So for Dan Quinn, what's the emphasis this week on making sure that they stop 26, the man who is probably going to win the defensive player of the or the offensive player of the year in the NFC?
Yeah. Every single time that I've coached against him, he's been the emphasis. And he's a remarkable player. We have faced some excellent running backs, through this season. And for him, another one. And it's the explosive plays that he can create. There's some running backs, it's 4, it's 5, but it's the long ones with that type of speed and the explosive plays. And that's what's most difficult when you're good, not so good. And so you have to be able to do right over and over again and not get bored with just being in the right spot over and over again, and the tackling. In games like this, it's just a premium. That's why we do work so hard at those things, to make sure our fundamentals are staying. Like if other teams are deteriorating at that, I want it just the opposite, that we're tackling at a higher level today than we were months ago. And so we work really hard at that specific skill.
And it's something that definitely has shown up. Washington has been very, very good in that department. And I think that emphasis is also great during the week of, it's not that you want to play scared, but it's not like, hey, go make a bunch of plays, be super aggressive, let's shoot gaps, let's whatever. It's like, no, just, you're not going to get in trouble for doing what you're supposed to do. And there are some backs that being a little more aggressive, you can get in trouble doing that. This is one of those guys. And there's other backs that you can be more aggressive and you're not really going to, the worst thing that happens is they get a 6-yard gain instead of a 2 or a -2. And it's worth the risk at that point. Saquon, not really worth the risk. And those second and third level defenders, making sure that they are there to clean stuff up is so critically important this week, because that's how it goes from like, oh man, that was an 8-yard gain, 2nd and 2, that kind of sucks, to, oh, well, it's the extra point now because Saquon scored a 70-yard touchdown, which Washington unfortunately has some experience with this year. When we get back, you'll hear even more from Jayden Daniels, more from Dan Quinn, more from Frankie Luvu and Terry McLaurin. But first, let's get an update on the latest in the world of women's sports, presented by Wawa. Chicken how you want it at Wawa, with customizable crispy or roasted chicken sandwiches. Bowl winning executive Scott Pioli joins us, now an analyst with the NFL Network at 6:30. Real quick, though, let's wrap up our Pick 6 at 6 here on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. We gave you some Dan Quinn, some Frankie Louvu, some Jayden Daniels, some Terry McLaurin. Let's continue with a little bit more from DQ. And one of the biggest problems that he's got to figure out this week.
Number 4.
Dan and the offensive staff have to decide what to do at right guard. Obviously, Sam Cosmi is sadly lost for the season due to the ACL injury that he sustained against Detroit on the B-Rob touchdown. And now you would think they would just move forward with Trent Scott, because Trent Scott played really well in the game on Saturday night. Was an excellent pass blocker, did okay in the run game. Cool. But now you got a week to prepare, and you've got a guy in Andrew Wiley who's played some guard before. You got Cornelius Lucas, who's ahead of Scott on the depth chart at tackle, that you could slide out to right tackle. So Brandon Coleman, a lot of people thought he was a guard. Could you kick him inside? So is that on the table, or is it just going to be Trent Scott on Sunday, Dan Quinn?
Yeah, a lot of thought to that, David. And first, let's give a quick shout out to Trent of coming in and really being somebody that can handle that. But yes, that is absolutely, how we go about it. And that would be there at any spot. Like what I was saying earlier, like what's the best thing for us to win this game? And then that is all there is. And so, that's really where we're at in terms of the next 3 days of our practice.
So it sounds like it's all on the table. I think that's something to watch for. It might just be something to put in Philly's head. Hey, we don't know. I don't know how much it actually affects what Philly's going to do. Here's what I do know. They're probably chomping at the bit because they've got Jalen Carter, who typically lines up right where Sam Cosmi usually is. And they had some wars in the first couple of games this season. So it is a big, 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 big question for Washington this week. What do you do along the offensive line? Those are some of the options, and we'll see if we learn any more as the week goes on. Of course, Cliff Kingsbury talks to the media tomorrow. I doubt he'll say much. We probably honestly won't know until they go take their first snap on Sunday. And if Trent Scott goes out there, I don't know that we're going to have a whole lot of information, or we're going to even remember that was a discussion we had on Wednesday. But that is kind of the status quo of things. On to number 5.
Number 5.
Jayden Daniels, the latest and greatest addition of the dual threat quarterback. He's already one of the best we've ever seen, certainly the best rookie we've ever seen of this variety, the level he's performing. And Jayden was asked today about running quarterbacks and how the position is played now versus maybe some of the guys that he saw growing up, although he's a young guy, so he probably had some guys he could watch growing up.
I think that's just how the position is played. You got guys on the other side of the ball that can run 4-4, 4-3, so you got to be able to move a little bit, be able to play make. So I think that's just, a part of the game and how the game's evolving now.
It's one of the things that attracted him to Dan Quinn, because Dan, as a defensive coach, knows how hard that is. Like, they can just break your defense. And, of course, on the other side is one of the guys who does that extraordinarily well. While he's not the most gifted passer, Jalen Hurts is an unbelievable runner. And he has a tendency to pick up big first downs in big spots and pick his spots very well. He's tough to bring down. He finishes runs. And, of course, if he can just get close, you got the tush push on fourth down. But for Jayden, I think what's magical is his ability to sit in the pocket and dissect the defense. And then if you rush him, then you have to catch him. And there's even times against the blitz where he just sees an overload coming left and he'll just be like, fine, I'll run to the right. All of you are going to play tag, basically, and you're running around this giant barrier called my offensive line, and you're vacating all this space over here, so I'm not it. And that's worked for him at times this year. Nevertheless, if he can keep his eyes up and find a little bit more down the field. As for DQ and his thoughts on this, he was asked if it's a prerequisite. Is it a must for mobility at the modern NFL quarterback position?
Yeah, Adam, I think it certainly helps because the extended plays that happen, in our game, whether it's the rush, the blitz, anything for the guys that can get outside the pocket and remain a dual threat, remain a passer on the run to rip it, or if they're dropping too far back to go. So it definitely, there's different levels of it for sure, but I would say it certainly feels like the guys are most difficult to defend have that capability.
You can do everything right against a starting quarterback. Everything that can run as a defense, what you'd coach on the paper, and then he can wreck your day. Just gets out, one guy misses, and then you're in a bad spot. And Jayden has done that to so many teams this year, and he did it to Philadelphia last time they played, which brings us to our final point in our pick 6.
Number 6.
Last time these two teams played was a weird game. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson got ejected. Jalen Hurts got hurt, but ultimately the Commanders won. So are they coming in with this underdog mentality, even though they're the lower seed, they're on the road, in the way that a lot of people would probably expect? I think you know what the answer is going to be from Dan Quinn.
We just don't let the outside narrative kind of drive it. And internally, we've got a lot of expectations about how we can play and what we do, but we never, went too far outside of things. Did we feel dismissed or put off? Yeah, of course some. I think that happened in the opening game. I felt dismissive. Hey, man, hang in there. It's going to be a long time. I was like, hey, F you, that's not how it's going to go down. And I was upset, but it wasn't disrespect. It was dismissiveness. And I felt some kind of way, but it didn't motivate me more to say, that's how they think of us. It wasn't disrespect. It was, we're going to be a lot better than what we just showed today. And eventually we'll show that. So it's not a prove it to everybody else or underdog story. It's, it's how we get down. This is not a 7-game series. And so, we got to play our best on Sunday at 3 o'clock. And that, to me, is the biggest factor.
And in a 1-game series where you got the best quarterback, you're going to play hard and you take care of the football, you got a great chance to win. And that's how the Commanders have gotten here. That is how they're going to try to get down again on Sunday against the Eagles. That's our Pick 6 at 6 here on the Hoffman Show. Tomorrow you'll hear from Cliff Kingsbury, Joe Witt Jr., and more. But coming up next, Scott Pioli. He hired Adam Peters for his first NFL job, and he joined us just over a year ago to talk about AP. A little over a year later, what's he think of the job that he's done? I think he's going to be pretty proud. We'll talk to Pioli next here on the Team 980. live as well on the free Odyssey app. We're streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. It was exactly 1 year and 10 days ago, I know because I went and looked it up this morning, that we opened our show by welcoming our next guest, who was the guy, and still is the guy, who gave Adam Peters his first job in the NFL. Scott Pioli, NFL Network analyst, multiple Super Bowl winner as an executive in the NFL. Did you think that 1 year and 10 days later, we would have you back to talk about the Commanders in the NFC Championship game?
I knew we'd be having this conversation or something close to it at some point. I can't say that I thought we'd be having it 12 months later, Craig, that's for sure. But you know, I remember that call and that conversation too. And then we even talked a little online and how happy and excited I am for Washington fans because, you know, when Washington football is good, it's good for the NFL. It's, you know, it's good.
It's fantastic. People ask me, oh, how you doing? I talk about the Washington Commanders for a living. How do you think I'm doing? I'm doing all right. Thanks for asking. How are you? What about, like, obviously you saw something in Adam Young, you hire him as a scout, and you watch his career, and people, if they want to go back and listen to that interview, I'd certainly recommend it for all the background information. But what about what he's done in the last year has impressed you most?
I think it's a combination of things, right? I think it's the head coach partnership that he has, which is, I mean, that is the most important thing, right? The most important thing is the head coach hiring and the head coach partnership. The next most important thing is who's your quarterback, building the team, building the locker room, building your staff, right? Getting things in place. And in this 1 year, he's done a lot of things. You know, and I think we talked about this on air last year, talking about what were some of the things I respected about Adam and liked about Adam. When I met him when he was a young guy. He had just finished playing at UCLA. He was a graduate assistant coach, you know, getting people coffee and doing whatever he had to do. And one of the things, you know, when I first brought him on board at the New England Patriots, I remember distinctly was how much respect he showed for some of our older scouts. There was a guy by the name of Larry Cook, who was our college director, had transitioned, was our West Coast scout, and Larry was, you know, in his latter years, and another guy by the name of Jake Hallam, who were terrific coaches. And I watched and paid attention to how Adam treated those folks. I remember Larry Cook's wife saying, you know, how respectful and how much he looked out for Larry when they were on the road together. And that meant a lot to me. And I bring up that story because I think as you watch how Adam built out his front office staff, his personnel staff, he had the intelligence or the good decision making to keep people like Doug Williams and Martin Mayhew. He brought in Lance Newmark, who had been a lot of places. He brought in some other people, Scott Fitterer. He did not allow his ego get in the way of surrounding himself with good people. And guys like Martin and Doug being able to provide wisdom and experience, I think has been a really important part. But again, not surprising knowing Adam and how he handles and treats people that have experience with respect.
Scott Pioli, NFL Network, with us here on the Hoffman Show. I love that story, and it leads perfectly into a version of the next question I wanted to ask you. And that's kind of just about some of those guys, like the guys that he kept, the guys that he brings in, some of the positions they create to flush out this front office, I think is amazing. Is there any one of those in particular that stands out to you, or a couple that you think, wow, that was a really, whether it's innovative or just like he saw it somewhere else and it worked and he decided that was something I want to do, move or position or person that he brought that really stands out to you?
No, you know, again, I just go back to I mean, Marty's around too, right? Is that Marty Herney's? There's a lot of really smart people that learn how to do things, and sometimes institutional knowledge and, things that Doug has, things that Martin has. I think that whole idea of I don't know if that's innovative, but he saw it firsthand. I mentioned some of the older people we had at the New England Patriots. There's also another guy around that he got to know by the name of Bucko Kilroy, who was, one of the founding fathers of scouting. And he was in his 80s, and we kept him at the Patriots. And I think if this is, I don't know if this is innovative or not, but making sure that he surrounded himself, again, with experience and knowledge, because none of us has all the answers, no matter how good we are, no matter how talented we are. I think it goes back to, again, him having enough understanding and humility again, I don't know if that's innovative or not.
Sure.
Because a lot of people, when they ascend to those positions, think they got it all figured out. And so to me, that was so critical.
For sure. Let me flip the question and see if this is a better way to ask it then. Because, like, Martin Mayhew was certainly a name that people around here could not wait to get rid of because they're like, oh, he's one of Rivera's cronies. Like, it was a failed administration. Get him out. Marty Herney, same thing. I mean, Marty and Ron go way back in Carolina. Scott Fitterer is available because he gets fired in Carolina after he helped replace Rivera in Carolina. And on down the list, like, all these guys, like, Newmark is one thing. He was lower, and they gave him a promotion. But they brought in a lot of guys who clearly had skill sets that helped them get high roles in the first place, but maybe that job was either too big for them or whatever the reason is, structurally, whatever, that they failed or were no longer welcome in the positions they had. How do you, as someone who is the head of a front office, especially for the first time, unlock those skill sets to be able to maximize the things that made all those people worthy of those big jobs in the first place?
Well, I think part of it there's humility on both sides, right? With the person that remains and the person that takes over. It's trust, it's security, and I mean security in a psychological security.
Yep.
And but I also think that there's a great deal of humility, and the people who are demoted or not necessarily in those positions. Here's what I think is people that are servants don't care about titles. They don't care about, and that's what the job of the general manager is. Yes, you have to oversee things. Yes, you have to be the boss. But really, in that role, Adam's job is to be a servant to the head coach who's serving the players, right? And that's the way this goes. And people, I think, sometimes lose sight of the fact, to answer the other part of the question, I think sometimes just because someone's fired doesn't mean that they're not any good.
Right.
Just because someone didn't have success in a situation doesn't mean that they're not any good. I was with Bill Belichick when Bill got fired in Cleveland, right? I've been with a number of other coaches and front office people. You know, I was with DQ, right? I was with DQ. DQ got fired. Thomas Dimitroff got fired. Thomas Dimitroff is an incredible general manager. So I think, you know, the first part of that question, when you were talking about, people with experience and they want to run people off, people don't go into those jobs trying to fail. Sometimes there's circumstances that are happening behind closed doors that the world never sees, that the media doesn't see, the fans don't see, that have something to do with success and or failure. And just because you're a part of a failed regime doesn't mean that you're a failure and doesn't mean that you're not any good.
That is very well put. Scott Pioli is with us from the NFL Network here on the Hoffman Show. So then he gets to picking players, and he's pretty good, and the guys he's got are pretty good at that part too.
They did all right.
Yeah. When you look at Jayden and you think of knowing Adam like you do, knowing DQ like you do, and obviously that is the piece. We can talk about all the other great things they've done, and that's what I do for 15 hours a week here between 4 and 7. But when you look at the Jayden piece of it, what has impressed you the most about either what he has done as an individual or the structure and circumstances that have allowed him to blossom like he has as an individual?
Well, I am a big believer in that the development of quarterbacks is circumstantial, right? And you have to have people around you on not only on the field and in your locker room, but coaches and staff. It takes a village. Now, that being said, I was really fortunate. I worked with the LSU football program as a consultant for Brian Kelly in Jayden's 2 years there, and I got to know him as soon as he walked in the door. And when I had a chance to spend time with him, I was a little bit taken back and was trying to sort out when I first met him, like, okay, this guy can't be this mature. He can't be this smart. He can't be this detailed. And that calm that you see was my every meeting with him. And, I remember reaching out to, or having communication with DQ and AP before the draft. And, I share the story with them about, I think I don't know if I know I've shared it in other places in DC about, there's this, I had to do Good Morning Football with NFL Network, and we were on Central Time. So I was in there real early in the morning. It was after 5:00 in the morning. And when I got there, Jayden was walking out of a room with these two guys I know weren't coaches, but they were, and he was walking out with his virtual reality goggles. And again, this is now the second year, and I said, "Hey man, what are you doing here?" And I'm thinking, okay, is this guy trying to play me or what? And I'm like, "What were you doing? What'd you learn with the virtual reality goggles?" And he's like, "Well, I've never been to Mississippi State. I've never been to Starkville." He said, "But I just spent the morning learning about Starkville and their sidelines. What it looks like is I can walk in that stadium now, and I know exactly where the play clocks are. Either the 30-second clock." And it's his attention to detail and maturity and understanding. He has a remarkable work ethic, but he also arrived with outstanding and beyond his year work habits. Then he's had a group of people around him. It's DQ, it's AP, it's Cliff, it's all of these people. There's a village that's developing him, and he's all in. I was blessed to be around Brady, and Brady had all those things that we're talking about here, but he had a village around him of people that were incredible coaches that helped him develop.
Scott, do you ever think of yourself as like the Forrest Gump of the NFL with all these people that you're around? And specifically this, if you watch the Commanders make the NFC Championship game, and I have been around all these dudes. I didn't know you had Jayden Daniels stories. I knew DQ and Adam from previous conversations. Every guy asked about you. You're like, yeah, I was here, I was there. You're the guy.
No, it's just good fortune, man. I'm blessed to be around good football people, and I'm attracted to their greatness, right? And yeah, so it's I've been fortunate.
No doubt about
it.
They
did a lot of other things with that roster too. Here's the other thing I'll say about the Jayden Daniels development.
For sure.
And is one of the most unsung signings that they had this year as a free agent, in my opinion, is Tyler Biadasz. And here's what AP did learn, and I know that DQ learned or knows. When AP was in New England, we always made sure that we had a really smart center for a young quarterback. And AP saw that. It started off with Mike Compton, Damian Woody. It was Danny Copen. There was always really smart people in the center, because that's the guy who's got to check and be on the same page and be able to help identify the front, identify the mic, and get protections called. And DQ, we had it with Alex Mack, who's one, I think should be a Hall of Fame center. And bringing in a guy like Tyler, who DQ had knowledge of, and watching the collaboration, quite honestly, between DQ and AP. I know AP saw that, when Bill and I were together in New England. That when you go through that list of free agents, you guys did a pretty good job, right? They knew that Jeremy Chin, who wasn't a fit for every team, was going to be good for the Commanders. Frankie Luvu, not the right guy for all teams, but certainly the right guy for that team and for DQ's defense. Bobby Wagner, of course. So they built the team the right way as partners. No doubt, and that has been so much fun to watch. All right, last but not least, with Scott Pioli here from NFL Network, that brings us to this weekend. It's a third time playing each other for the Commanders. Don't ask me a prediction, Craig.
I'm not going to ask you a prediction.
Don't make it hard.
I try not to ask people for straight up predictions. But what's the most interesting aspect of this game for you? The thing that if it goes one way, the Eagles win. If it goes the other way, the Commanders win. The biggest slider, if you will, on the game settings.
Slider. I'm hungry, by the way. I haven't had dinner yet. I'm excited because it's two really good teams talent-wise, two good quarterbacks. I can't wait to watch Saquon. I can't wait to watch Saquon against the Commanders' defense. I want to see the rubber's going to meet the road here somehow, some way. And I want to see can the Commanders hold Saquon the entire game, because that's what happens. You never know, and then all of a sudden Saquon has a 70-yard run in the fourth quarter. I'm excited, but I grew up an NFC East guy anyway. Right, I was a Giants fan, so I loved as a kid to hate the Eagles. I loved to hate Washington. I hated Dallas more than anything. I'm excited that to me, again, I'm more focused on how good this is for football and the people involved and the people coaching. I mean, I think the world of the Commanders folks, but, I worked with Nick Sirianni too. He was an entry-level quality control coach for us. And I have a lot of respect for him. There's good football people coaching this weekend, and everyone's going to see good football.
And that's how you get here. Just 4 remaining. NFL Network has loads of coverage, including from Scott and all his colleagues. You can, of course, watch that wherever you watch your football, on television or on NFL Plus. Scott, always great to catch up. Hopefully see you down the road. And thanks for all the stories. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Craig. Appreciate you, man.
That's Scott Pioli with us here on The Hoffman Show. When we get back, we wrap things up with real things real people said into real microphones. Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. What a show. Robert Mays, fantastic. Scott Pioli, fantastic. Sorry to let you down with Santana Moss and the schedule mishap there, but I do think the Tandem Man and I are going to chat tomorrow, so we'll have him. We're hoping to have a couple of more folks on the show tomorrow, so I'm not going to jinx anything. I think that's what I've learned, Anthony, is unless something is 100% locked in stone, I'm just going to say, I'm not going to false promise you in terms of, I'm not going to say we have a big guest coming and then actually not, and then be like, oh, sorry, they canceled. But I'm also not going to name names unless I have it pretty well locked in.
That's fair.
And I got a big one that's floating tomorrow that it depends on his schedule as he is doing some stuff to get ready for this game. And if we get him, it's going to be great. And if not, that would suck. But now you won't know who it is. So we got that going for us, which is nice. You know what the Commanders have going for them, Anthony?
What?
Pre-game speeches from Terry McLaurin. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, there's only one option for real things real people said in real microphones today.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
Mic'd up, divisional weekend style. Scene. You're in the tunnel. You're getting ready to go out and play the biggest game of your life, unless you're one of like 3 guys who's actually made it further than this, wearing burgundy and gold. Number 17's at the head of your player line, getting ready to run out. And then this happens.
Hey, we here. We the show. Hey, everything you got inside of you got everything you need to be successful. No reason to be fearful. No reason to have anxiety, because everything you need is inside you. We live a great life. But listen here. When this money gone, when this fame gone, the only thing you really got is your name and your reputation. What they gonna say about your name? What they gonna say about your reputation? What they gonna say when they turn that film on? I know what they gonna say about me. I'm gonna ride out. They gonna say we some dogs, man. Let's get it. See who you say you are, man. 1 on 3. 1, 2, 3. Man.
Terry hits every note in that. If I wasn't like battling off like the flu or whatever the hell I'm fighting here, I would be ready to run through a wall, and I might be ready to run through a wall anyway. He challenges folks. He challenges them like, you say you're this, well, go prove it. I'm gonna do it. Like, he leads. He just fires people up. He hits the right tone. It's authentic. It's believable. He kind of breaks the cliche by saying, hey, we live a great life. We don't got to do this. We made our money. What are they going to say about you, though? That's Anthony. You needed that before flag football nationals.
Nah, for real, though. I
y'all did well,
that.
But
what'd you say?
I said y'all did well, but dang.
Nah, we could have definitely done better. And a Terry McLaurin hype speech like that definitely would have got us going. I'm not even gonna lie, Craig. Like, the first couple of games we had, energy was low. I'm like, come on, guys, we came down here. We got a mission. We got a purpose. Let's go.
You got to bookmark that, and every time before you play from now on, that's gotta go in.
Might need it.
That's got to go in. All right, that's our show for today. If you missed any part of it, check out the podcast, YouTube, wherever it is that you want your on-demand for the podcast. Just search The Hoffman Show wherever you get yours. And we'll see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock here on the Team 980.